What's going on YouTube? Seth Sanchez here, and today we're going to be talking about settings for shooting basketball, or pretty much any indoor sport for that matter. But basically just going to be covering basketball because I recently came out with a video that showed the workflow and covering NCAA basketball, and I made the mistake of not talking about camera settings that were used for indoor basketball. So a lot of people are commenting about it, asking, can I make a video about it? So here it is. So let's go over typical camera settings that you should have while shooting basketball. This can apply to indoor sports in general, and there is no specific numbers or formula to shooting indoors as far as camera settings go. You're not going to have the same aperture or shutter speed or ISO as I'm going to tell you, but this is just in general. So just keep that in mind as we go through this. And I'm also going to cover camera lenses and bodies I would recommend for shooting these. And as you guys know, I'm going to be recommending a lot of expensive things, but I'm also going to keep in mind the cheaper end stuff. However, indoor sports is very difficult to shoot with cheaper end stuff because, especially in high school or lower, because those gyms are like a dungeon and you need a 2.8 is crucial. I shoot at high schools and I'm shooting with 2.8 lenses and I'm hitting at about 8 to 10,000 ISO just to achieve 800th of a second, or God forbid 640th of a second. 640th of a second you could get away with maybe, but it's a little bit tricky. But let's just get into it. So let's just start with the shutter speed. So yeah, on your DSLR, this menu, if you guys have Canon, this will look very familiar. Nikon's a bit different, but you guys get it anyway. So shutter speed. Actually, right here, this setup I have is literally what I had for the USC versus UCLA game. The lighting there got a little bit worse this year. I don't know what happened, but I had to crank it up to 5,000 ISO. For NCAA and higher, I want to keep my aperture at around 1,000th because they're going to be a lot more athletic and faster, and there's a lot more movement going on in opposed to high school or lower. But even with high school, you generally want to achieve at least 1,000th of a second. That is a basic rule, but you can break that rule, of course. It just depends. You can try 640th if you really need to bring it down because you have a f4 lens or 5.6 or whatever it may be. Try to get a 2.8 lens. It'll really help you out. But just try to keep your shutter speed around 800th to 1,000th of a second. If you're shooting basketball for high school, you could get away with 640th, but your keeper rate might go down because it might be a little bit blurrier, and you need to really have a steady hand. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time. But to give you guys an idea, the remote camera that I used in my previous video, that was set up to 640th of a second. And I think I only saw maybe 1 to 4 photos that had motion blur because the shutter speed was too slow. But the reason I did 640th was because I wanted to crank up my aperture to increase the depth of field. I was at 5.0 for that remote, and I was at 8,000 ISO, and it was 640th of a second. But the reason I got down to 640th was not only because I wanted my aperture to be higher to increase my depth of field, but it's on a remote and it's attached to a magic arm. It's being perfectly still, so I don't have to worry about me, shaking when I'm holding it. So I'm able to get lower. I wouldn't be surprised if I can go down to 500th of a second. I'm gonna probably try that next time. But so if you're doing a remote, you could try to get away with 500th of a second or 640th of a second. That should be fine. As far as shooting with handheld goes, it depends. If it's high school, you can probably get away with 640th of a second. Try it out. If your photos are still coming out blurry, go up to 800th of a second, and from there you should be good. And if for some reason it's still happening, go to 1,000th. And if it's still happening, then there's something wrong with your camera or lens. Go get it checked out. So that's with shutter speed. Shutter speed, generally you want to keep it around 1,000th of a second for indoor basketball or indoor sports in general. That's what I follow. As far as aperture goes, it's, in my opinion, pretty crucial that you have a 2.8 lens if you're doing especially high school, because the lighting is god awful, like I said. But as you can see, I had it booted up to 3.2. I see people do 4.0, but you are going to increase your ISO quite a bit. And even at a college, a very nice college, USC, the lighting was pretty poor. I was at 5,000 ISO. It's not the worst, but it's still pretty high up there. But I wanted to put 3.2 because people ask me, why do you have a 2.8 lens if you're going up to 3.2? What's the point of having a 2.8? Well, the point of that is for those situations where you need 2.8, you use it. However, when you can go up a little bit just to increase your depth of field, because when there's so much movement, you want to get in focus shots. Having that 3.2 or 3.5 or 4.0 crank up from 2.8 will help you. Now, don't get confused and think, oh, if I have a 4.0 lens, like a 300 millimeter 4.0, I'm gonna get more in focus. Every lens is different. Every lens performs completely differently. If you have a cheaper end lens, let's say you have a 400 5.6. I don't know how much that lens is, and I'm not saying that it's a bad lens, but when you compare it to a 400 2.8 IS Mark II, the 400 2.8 IS Mark II is going to perform way better and be way sharper. Even at 2.8 at wide open. When a lens is tack sharp wide open, it's usually going to be pretty expensive. There's some what's the word? There's some I can't think right now. It's exceptions. There's some exceptions to that. I've seen like the 135 2.0 Canon lens. I've heard it's amazing and it's very affordable. But in general, if a lens is tack sharp wide open, it's going to be expensive. So when you have a 2.8 lens and you boot it up to 4.0, it's going to be sharper than a 400 5.6 because it's just an all-around better lens. There's better optics, there's better AF, there's just better performance in that lens, and that's why it costs more money. For the most part, that doesn't mean every time it's going to be like that, but that was just one example. So that's why I'm at 3.2 anyway, and I want to just increase my depth of field. If I'm able to, I will do this. If you can't, then that's when it's time to bring it down to 2.8. Okay, ISO. ISO, you want to obviously keep your ISO as low as possible. The reason for that is, if you are shooting, you already know what this is. When you boot up your ISO, you are going to get very, very grainy images. However, what it allows you to do is make your camera sensor more sensitive to light coming into the lens. So it has a pro and a con, just like all these other settings. But the ISO, the pro side, yes, it gives you more light when you need more light. You're in a situation where it's just way too dark with the settings that you need bare minimum. That's when you boot up your ISO. It's the last resort. It's the last thing you should set up. That's at least what I do. And then the con side is when you have it up higher, you're going to get the grainier images. You're going to make the image quality be degraded. That's what happens. Every camera body does it, even the 1DX. No matter how nice of a camera you have, when you boot up your ISO, as far as 2015 goes, that may change. But when you boot up your ISO, your image quality is going to go down and be degraded. That's just the way it is. So that's the typical settings you want to use for indoor basketball, indoor sports in general. As far as white balance goes, which is another thing, one of the YouTubers commented on my video for the shooting NCAA basketball goes. I did auto for that one, but if I had to if you're gonna do the custom one, most cameras have this, I believe. Pretty sure all of them do. But if you want to do this, I would just say it's gonna be lower. It's not gonna be, where is it at right there? 6,500? Yeah, no. That's way too high. It's going to come out really orange if you do that. It's really low, honestly. It's like in the maybe like 3,600. I'm just taking a wild shot, but from what I remember when I've done custom, I'm usually around there. Just mess with it and try it out. But for the most part, for the 1DX at least, I do auto. It's almost every time it nails it, so I don't have a problem with it. And now let's get into where are we at right now? Here we go. Well, obviously you want high-speed continuous. You want to take the bursts. And then the last thing was you got one shot in AI servo, and then there's one that cheaper cameras have, or older ones that Canon has. It's called like AI focus. Never use that. I never use it. And I actually stopped using one shot. I just stay on AI servo for everything. So that's that. And the last thing is your focus points. That was a big one people were asking about. So I use Expand AF. I've seen shooters, plenty of shooters do the single point, and whatever you want to do will work. I mean, I wouldn't recommend the bigger ones because with basketball especially, because there's so many, people getting in the way, you don't want your camera to focus on something and else, like except the one person that's going up for the shot. So what I would recommend is the single point, or the most is the Expand AF area where you got like 4 around the middle one. So that's what I used for the game last night. All the shots you saw, that was what I used for that. Now, as far as knowing where to place it, it's really tricky. Basketball especially, it's such a fast sport. You just got to be careful. But I am constantly just doing this. When I'm shooting, I'm moving it around where I need to go. So, and you got to be really quick with your framing, but that's what I do. I have the joystick here set up to just move when I want, when I'm looking through the viewfinder, and this isn't even on the screen. It's just completely black. I just do this, and if you have it set up that way, when you look through the viewfinder, you'll see it moving around. That's all I do. I'll go back and forth with my thumb between, focusing and this. I'll place it where I think I need to have it, and I'll hold AF on to focus, and then I'll use the shutter button to take the pictures. And it's that simple. That's what I do. So that's it for the camera settings. And as far as lenses go, I mean, it's really hard. I'm going to recommend, the best ones that I think are for this. I would say, number one, the 24 to 70 millimeter 2.8. It's the best one I have for the wide angle shots. This is what I use for the remote, and if you're going to hand hold it, you can do it as a floor remote as well, or you can just do it by hand and put it on the floor and hold it up and angle it up. This is a great lens. I love this lens. It's great. So for Canon or Nikon, or any brand for that matter, 24-70 would be your best bet for wide angle side of things. I used to use the 16-35, and maybe for some occasions it's appropriate and it'll work, but for the most part it's a little bit too wide. With this, it's pretty much the best focal length for that. Next up, we've got right here the 70 to 200 2.8 IS Mark II. Any 70 to 200 2.8 will be fine. You don't need the highest end one from either Nikon or Canon, the VR Mark II or the IS Mark II. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's as long as you have that 2.8, that's the really important part. The 2.8 really helps, especially for basketball because it's indoors. This is the most common lens you will see used at basketball games. It's perfect. This is the main go-to lens. And the last one I would recommend is the 400. I'm going to have to make room for this sucker. Now this is an opinion, so keep that in mind. I would say the 400 2.8 is really good. I hardly have to crop with it. It is a bit difficult to use because it's so large. Another one is a 300 2.8. A lot of people use that, and if I had to choose between the two, if I owned both, I would honestly probably bring the 300 just because of the size difference. The image quality is going to be equal, so there's no issue there. They're both 2.8, and the 300 is a lot more lighter. I would recommend that one. If you own the 300, use it. It is perfect. The only reason I'm using the 400 or recommending it is just because I have it right now, and if you have a 400 but don't own a 300 as well, the 400 will do fine. Unless you're on a cropped body, then you're going to have trouble. So that's another thing to keep in mind. All these recommendations are on full frame. The 7200 and 2470 is still fine on crop. Don't worry about that. Maybe a 1635 will be appropriate on a cropped body if it's 1.6. But otherwise, 2470 is still fine. If you're doing crop bodies, then I would say a 300 2.8 for sure. Even then, it might be a bit too much. You can try a 200 2.8 prime that Canon has. Nikon, I'm not sure what they have, but anywhere around the 200 range should be fine. Or probably the 7200 will be fine because you use the bigger ones for when they're on the other side of the court. The 7200 on a crop body should be just fine. Excuse me. Go ahead and give it a shot. As far as camera bodies go, I'm always going to recommend a 1DX or a D4S for those of you who have it or can afford it. If you can't afford it, any body is fine. Don't worry about it. Use what you have. Do what you can with it. Get some kick-ass shots and just do what you can. If you have cheaper bodies, it actually will help you get better. You're limited, and limitation is good because it helps you think more and work around, the issues that you have. So don't worry about it if you don't have a crazy expensive camera body or lenses even. Like, just if you're shooting with the lens that's 4.0 or 3.5 or 5.6 and it can't go down to 2.8, yes, it's going to be extremely difficult because the lenses are the most important part in my opinion. That 2.8 is so crucial, especially with indoor sports or nighttime sports at high schools, because it's just a dungeon out there. If you have done this and tried shooting this already with this type of setup, you already know this, so it's really hard. Do what you can to save up and get those 2.8 lenses, especially if you're trying to build up a portfolio and you're trying to work your way up. It's really crucial to get those lenses in that gear, because it does matter that you have this stuff, because if you're working your way up, you're going to have to get those 2.8 lenses, because in those situations you need to be ready for it and have the right gear for you need the right tools for the job, So do what you can though. Don't let it discourage you if you don't have a 2.8 or a nice camera body. Go out and shoot with what you got. People have been asking me, I have this combo with this combo. Is this okay? It's like, for now, yes, use it. At least you got a camera to shoot with, So that's it for this video, guys. If you guys have any questions, leave it in the comments below as always, and thank you guys for your support, and I will see you next time.